Joining me now in his usual Monday spot is the host of Greenlight Pod, two-time Super Bowl champ Chris Long, back here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Christopher? You good?
I've been better, Rich. Been better.
Okay. All right. Anything I can help with, Chris? Anything I can help with?
Can you play linebacker for the Philadelphia Eagles?
No, that's not my lane, sir. That's not my lane.
Yeah, no.
What'd you make of the Niners' destruction of Philadelphia on Sunday?
I mean, hey, I thought it was a bad spot for the Eagles, but I didn't think it was going to be like that. Like this is the best team in football right now. I think for most of the year, when they're healthy, they've had the highest heights. You talk about like beating up on Dallas and now Philly. Brock Purdy, 500 yards in those two games, 8 touchdowns, no interceptions. I think it's a bad matchup for anybody, but when you look across the conference at Philly and a possible rematch, I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, Shaq Leonard's not going to make the difference. Getting Cunningham back is not going to be the difference. Like, it's not going to make up 23 points. That delta concerns me. And when you look at the tape, we said coming in this game, they had to win the middle of the field. They didn't do that. They had to tackle these guys over 11 yards after the catch. Didn't do that. The one thing they did that surprised me is they came out quick. They jumped on these guys, but they kicked field goals. And yeah, maybe that game's different if you jump out to a 14-0 lead. And I think when you had it 23-16 or whatever it was, or 21-13 coming out of that first drive in the second half, you score a touchdown and the defense has to stand up. They just can't. 5 plays, 70 yards. It's like, if you can't keep these guys off the field and if you can't contend with what they do in the middle of the field, it's just going to be a long day whenever you play them. Now, the next time you could play them and you could be perfect and you could beat them, but you have to be perfect to beat these guys because they're that good when they're healthy.
So then I guess the question for you is, who's good enough to beat the 49ers right now? Because in the NFC, the 49ers have eviscerated the two teams that you would feel that have the opportunity to beat them out for the 1 seed, including the Eagles, who are still 1 game in front of them. But all they got to do is have the same record as the Cowboys and the Eagles, with some winnable games for them, with the exception of, I guess, the Ravens coming to their house on Christmas night. What do you got for me on that front, Chris?
Well, there's a couple teams in the AFC, and I don't love if Kansas City got there. I don't love the matchup, anyways. But if they get their backers back, I think that's a big deal, right? Like, without Nick Bolton, it's been tough sledding. You saw that last night, like going down another backer in Tranquil. Just they're too thin there, and then you lose Cook late in the game. That's another big issue. So I don't know how I feel about that matchup if they're not at full strength. Maybe Baltimore, but the playoffs. We play these games for a reason, and Brock could have a game where he turns the ball over 2 times. I'm not saying they're unbeatable. But in a big situation, you got the coach, you have the personnel, and you have a quarterback who now has showed up in the biggest spots. And I gotta hand it to these guys. They do look like, when they're healthy, the best team in football.
Yeah, I mean, Purdy did come up with a drive at the end of a game to win a game in Cleveland, but his kicker, Jake Moody, missed the field goal. But that's basically the only thing that I think we haven't seen from Purdy yet, right? Is a W in that situation.
Yeah, sure. And as you put it, he drove them down the field in a situation where they weren't playing their best ball, and they could have survived that game. But the Minnesota game, I really do think that was an aberration. It was a perfect storm with some injuries and that whole thing. For me, if they get home field, it's hard to imagine somebody playing well enough to beat them there. But if there's any team that can do it, it's Philly on their best day in the NFC. But that was far from their best day. It just, we talked about the personnel issues. They're not getting fixed completely. And I don't know, like when we won the Super Bowl in 2017, we had Nigel Bradham, we had Hicks, who's a really good player. We had Kendricks. We had guys that could really play there. And Howie Roseman, as good as he's been, this has been the one thing they've been willing to roll the dice on year after year, is that linebacking core.
Chris Long here, Greenlight podcast host here on the Rich Eisen Show. What's your level of concern for the Chiefs, Chris?
I'm concerned about them. I think coming in this year, you look at this team and you say they're not gonna win the same way that they have in the past, like, right? But the interesting thing is, yeah, they're not gonna be high flying. They got the same guys outside they had last year, minus like Juju. So something's changed, whether it's the departure of Eric Bieniemy, or I know Andy Reid's the play caller, but Matt Nagy and these guys, they have an effect on the game and how you're preparing and situational football. And I know it's a group effort, and something's missing. And I personally think if you're the Chiefs, the number one thing you have to do is figure out who the wide receivers are that you can trust. Last week they had 4 guys over 50% of the snaps, first time all year. I thought they were starting to figure some things out, but a lot of Sky Moore. And I know that Veach hasn't had a great run of setting the table for Patrick Mahomes, but there's no need to hang on to this thing with Sky Moore. I know Tony is completely undependable, but at least he has some upside. MVS is not perfect, but he's not a negative like Sky Moore has been at times in the offense. And I think Rashee Rice needs the ball more. So
do you put that last pick on him? The one where Mahomes left it out there towards the sideline, and the defender ran the route better. Okay,
I can't say for sure. Listen, I don't want to cape for Patrick when he makes that mistake.
Right.
If I'm not positive that the wide receiver's dead wrong, but to me, there's too many instances where you're like, is the receiver running the right route there? Like, Mahomes is not a guy who puts the ball in the wrong spot a lot. And there's been plenty of situations where I'm like, is somebody on the wrong page here? I think people are going to make it like the sky's falling with Green Bay. Been listening to this for a couple weeks and the whole thing. I don't think they're going to look right until they get Nick Bolton back.
Mm-hmm.
I worry about the secondary, having to put Mitchell in there, who looked turned around on that heave with Chris Jones bearing down on Jordan Love. But more than anything, people are going to make a big deal about the offense. Until the end of the third quarter, their drives were all 70 yards. They kicked field goals early in the game. For a stretch, they actually look like, if you're going to tell me they can't make it work, I don't believe you. I think they can make it work. But they have to capitalize when they get in the red zone, and they have to work through some of these issues. But as evidenced by the middle of that football game, I don't think there were a bunch of 3-and-outs or bad possessions. They just had to. I think they wasted that possession late in the game where they were down 5. They took a shot on 2nd and 8. Just keep running the ball. So as bad as I want to put it on the players, I don't think there's anything they can't overcome, but the scheme has to be better. And I'll say this, in the AFC, there is no San Francisco. So my panic level for them is not going to be that high, because any of those 4 teams now can punch their ticket to the Super Bowl. Like Jacksonville, Kansas City, Baltimore, Miami, they're all in the same group. I think before the last month of the season, I thought it was Kansas City and the road went through Arrowhead, and I still think that can happen. When you look at the schedules down the stretch, they have an easy stretch. If they beat Buffalo, I think they're going to have home field, but they're in the pack now.
And Chris Long here on the Rich Eisen Show, Greenlight with Chris Long, podcast host. So in order to win in the playoffs and then make a nice run in the playoffs, you need to have a defense that can get after the quarterback. You need to have a running game. You also need to have a quarterback who can make some plays, a quarterback who is elusive, and you need a play caller who knows how to get in his bag at the right time. How did I not just describe the Green Bay Packers to you, Chris?
Well, I thought you were caping for the Chiefs because they got that too, but the Packers, I agree. I think a lot of people have been down on Jordan Love because of the first half of the season, but if you look at the way they called offenses, I don't know if this was any of Jordan Love's fault in preparation or, the way that they felt like from a trust standpoint. It just might have been a thing where they're like, he's not ready yet. And they ran a lot of their first half offenses, especially like preseason games. I mean, it was vanilla. They didn't take shots. And over the last month of the season, Jordan has taken shots. They've been really good in the intermediate areas of the field. I think he's great turning his back to the defense. He's perfect for that offense. And, sticking his foot in the ground and finding that deep crosser or, changing his arm angle. Like, he can do a lot of those things in the short passing game, in the intermediate passing game, that make me think that he's a real deal pro quarterback. And I thought last night we could make it about the Chiefs, and we will.
Yeah.
But this is about the Packers, man. Like, to me, it's as much about the Packers as it is about the Chiefs. And 2 weeks in a row, not just beating good teams, but jumping them. Like, they jumped these guys. And I thought, I think the edge rushers they have are a plus. Knocking Mahomes down in the red zone a couple times. The group up front's really good. They're getting guys back healthy on defensive side of the football. And that offense is really, really clicking. So, if you look at Detroit, for instance, who's going to probably win the division, right? Even if Green Bay keeps winning.
Yeah.
Look at who you might host in the playoffs. You might host
them.
Sean McVay, who wants to beat Jared Goff, Matt Stafford, who wants to win in Detroit.
Yeah.
You might get the Packers for the third time in a month. You might get, any number of these teams. You might get Minnesota for the third time in a month. Like, none of these matchups seem awesome if you're Detroit. But that's the hidden storyline for me, is like, some of these NFC wildcard teams are growing up to where they can make noise. And I think the Packers are number one there.
Before I let you go, Chris, what did you make of the College Football Playoff Committee's Final Four? What'd you make of that one?
I got no issue with it. Listen, I'm not a college football analyst. I mean, like, I'm sure you got somebody on staff who watches a lot closer than me, but you want these guys to make the perfect decision. It's impossible. This thing, like, a Power 5 conference champion could be left out any year, right? And, Florida State, as good as you want that pat on the back because you played great, you beat who was in front of you, the whole thing. What you're asking people, if you're a Florida State fan, is to have a 23-point line I'm not saying 23, but like multiple touchdown line in the first round of that playoff. And I think that's what's plagued the playoff to this point, has been these first round games have sucked a lot of the time. I want to see a playoff where all the games are good. And, like, people that say, hey, the best team's got to get in, you didn't even get what you want, really, because if we're saying that, it's not just Bama, then Georgia has to get in over somebody. So there's no one way that you can boil this thing down. It's an imperfect assignment for these guys, and I think they did the best they could with it. I know some people are going to say, hey, Florida State should be in, but, like, you're telling me they're going to win. Now bet me on the first round game. Like, if Florida State's supposed to be in, then tell me they have a chance to win that first round game. They wouldn't.
Well, I hear you, and there are 14-point underdogs to Georgia in the Orange Bowl that they did make, and I understand your point. I just went, kind of all in on this subject matter before you joining, and one of the things I said was, what if there was a committee of individuals the year you lost Carson Wentz to say, hey, you're not you're not the same team with Nick Foles,
There's a big difference.
And that is?
Because, there's a big difference. The big difference is we had 4 games or whatever it was without Carson Wentz. So, like, starting there, that doesn't hold up, because you actually have an opportunity to see this guy over a 3-4 game period where we played the Giants, we beat the Raiders, we finished that game out on the road with a backup quarterback, and ultimately we won the whole thing. So unless you're saying that Florida State has a legitimate chance to win with a second or third string quarterback, which we'll never know.
But see, that's my point. We're not going to know. You know what I mean? And
but come on. Like, it's apples to oranges, in my opinion.
I mean, that's why I wanted to ask you, because,
I
were on the team that I was just talking about.
No. But to liken us to Florida State, I put my whole life savings on them not winning the college football playoff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we were still the 1 seed. We had an advantage with home field. And in the NFL, I do think it's more of a team game. You could say, hey, quarterback, but we see all the time that backup quarterbacks come in there. I had Tulane. I heard that guy got hurt. He was, like, out drinking or something. The starting quarterback got hurt, like, the night before the game, and they're playing somebody earlier this season. I'm like, I'm putting the balance on the team with the starting quarterback, and it ends up being a shootout, and I almost lose the bet. It happens all the time in college football, and in the pros. I just think having that 4-game window for us to get into the playoffs and see what we're about is what differentiates. If this happened mid-season, you might have an argument, but I don't think so. Not the last 2-3 games of the season.
Yeah, I just thought Florida State could get your dog masks, and throw them on, and you never know. You know what I'm saying?
Booger and Danny Cannell might like that. Now, the thing I do like about this whole thing is watching everybody melt down in real time. Because I don't care enough. Like, that's the thing. People are gonna be mad about what I said here.
Right.
Like, somebody's gonna be mad, but I don't care because it's not what I do for a living.
Yeah.
And I'm just a fan, and I watch the games like everybody else. But I think if you want the best 4 teams or a combination of the best 4 teams plus the most deserving, I think they got that.
You got a lot going on inside the NFL. What else are you doing? What's your pod? What do you want to throw out there?
Just I think we get Bijan Robinson this week. So, anytime the Falcons win, that's good because we've been hoping to get him for a little bit, and it's always 50-50.
So when you have him, you're going to use him? Or are you going to sit him down? You're going to bring in Patterson for a few questions?
He's actually just going to stand next to me.
Is that what it's going to happen?
Yeah, we're going to have him on one Zoom window, and then Patterson's going to come in and Algier.
Right. Well, Algier will finish the interview, obviously.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
He'll vulture the end of the interview. That's the way it's going to work. Okay.
Exactly.
Very good. All right, Chris. Thanks for the time. Greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Rich.
You got
Take it easy.
Green Light with Chris Long podcast host Chris Long here on The Rich Eisen Show. Catch The Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern for free.